Resident Evil Requiem is finally here, and this is a particularly interesting entry into the franchise because Capcom wants to appeal both to the action fans of Resident Evil and the more traditional survival horror fans. Definitely, I'm more interested in the survival horror aspect, and I think it's a pretty mixed bag. This game features two playable characters, Grace Ashcroft, the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft from the Resident Evil Outbreak spinoffs, and Leon S. Kennedy, who's one of the most iconic characters in video game history and definitely a mainstay of Resident Evil. I want to say that I love Grace Ashcroft as a character. I think she is a really interesting character, and a lot of people talk about her stuttering and how her anxiousness sort of makes her an annoying character, but I absolutely disagree. I think she's exactly what the Resident Evil series needs. She's not a trained mercenary. She has essentially no self-defense skills apart from the gun that she knows how to use, or shoot at least. And she is a character who's very anxious, and she really just doesn't know what to do half the time. She's just your average, everyday person. Now, when it came to Leon, he's a trained cop, and then he was a BSAA agent, and he even went to Spain in the middle of nowhere, essentially, to rescue the daughter of the president. So Leon has been through a lot. He's got a lot of experience. Just like other Resident Evil characters, like Jill with her STARS training, Chris especially, and then you have Claire, who learned self-defense from Chris. So she has no formal training or combat experience. She's just an FBI analyst who basically spends all of her waking days on a computer, much like all of us. So I think she's a great character. And then, of course, you have Leon, who is a very trained, experienced mercenary. He definitely knows what he's doing. He's getting up there in terms of age, of course, and he may have some residual T-virus in him. They call it Raccoon City Syndrome. But otherwise, he is a trained mercenary. So yes, he's going to be German suplexing and performing a Northern Lights bomb on all the zombies that he sees. Grace isn't. She's kind of frail. And I think that works out a lot for her character. I love the care center in this game. I think it is a wonderful location. And in my opinion, this is the best section in the entire game, at least for me. Of course, I'm a bit biased because I prefer the survival horror stuff. The care center, which is run by Victor Gideon, of course, he kidnaps Grace and he basically forces her to be here and she has to escape. I think it is such a beautiful location. And of course, you do have the RE engine, which is able to render extremely realistically detailed environments. I can talk all day about how much I love the RE engine. It especially worked out beautifully in Resident Evil 7. But this game is a really pretty looking game, and this uses the PS5 and, the more advanced processing powers, and it doesn't have a PS4 version like Village. So you really get to see it shine. And I think the zombies in this game are really interesting too, because they are mimicking what they used to do in their real lives. Like, there's one zombie who goes around obsessively cleaning every mess that she finds. She's like the cleaner zombie. And then there's one zombie who is obsessed with turning all the lights off. So they have like a certain memory of their humanity, and they fixate on that memory, and it dictates their behavior. I think that is such a fascinating character design. And then there's a couple of zombies that just walk around singing all the time. I think they are definitely a really cool enemy. The zombies in this game, they're so cool. And I really do like the fact that Capcom is actually going out of their way to sort of experiment a little bit, and I think that's wonderful. And then you have the bigger zombies like the girl and Chunk, who just kind of go around and get in the way, and you have to redirect yourself. I think they are really greatly designed zombies. I love the care center. I love the enemies. Of course, you do have the tradition of Resident Evil where you can stagger them and you can form a melee attack and everything. And then you have like the hypoglemic injector, which basically just explode zombies, and it's really nice. But as I mentioned, I love the care center. It's a really beautiful location. And then you switch over to Leon, and then you at first have a couple of small sections where you go through a bit of the care center and you take down a boss or two. The early Leon sections last about 10 minutes before it goes back to Grace, and of course it's all action. Leon has a hatchet and he can parry. He has like bigger weapons like a shotgun. He gets access to like a machine gun at one point, which Grace doesn't. Grace is stuck with the pistol that she has and the injectors that she finds. And the game really wants to highlight that Leon can perform these incredible melee attacks where he can just annihilate zombies, whereas Grace had to really go out of her way to avoid it. And I think that the early Leon sections are really good for showing off the differences in gameplay. Leon is not helpless whatsoever. And then you go back to Grace, and you're definitely more so focused on distracting enemies and avoiding them as much as you can. But as I mentioned, I really do like the Grace sections a lot. I think this is Resident Evil at its finest. And I just kind of wish that, Grace was in the game a little bit more. Of course, they do give her half the game, basically. They try to evenly distribute it with Leon and Grace. Of course, Grace meets another character along the way named Emily. And Emily is a woman, or a little girl, I should say, who has cataracts and she's blind. And you learn that she's basically being created in a lab. And you want to try to help her escape as much as you can. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic that Grace has. Her goal is not only to get herself out of the care center, but to bring Emily with her, to rescue her. And of course, as the story unfolds, you do get to learn a bit more about the zombies and how they operate. By the way, check out this cutscene here. Isn't that fascinating? That's one of the cleaner zombies. And of course, you do get to run into Victor Gideon and other enemies like Chunk a couple of times if you don't just annihilate him. Victor Gideon is basically the big bad guy of the game. Him and Zeno, who's basically just a clone of Albert Wesker. But the villains don't really do much in this game. I mean, yeah, sure, Gideon kidnaps Grace and brings her to the care center, but not much happens after that. With Grace, at least. I mean, Zeno shows her, like, oh, this is your potential. This is who you need to be. Will you like to destroy Elpis or release it? And then that's, like, kind of it. Like, that's all Gideon really does. And then after you complete the care center, there's one more small little section in which you go to an underground umbrella lab, or a lab of some sort that's run by Victor Gideon. And then you find out that, okay, Gideon is using the blood of these zombies. He's like farming them almost to transfer their memories, which I think is a pretty cool concept. And of course, Ark was like the secret underground lab that Spencer ran. Of course, Victor was inspired by Spencer. And I really do like the idea of a big, giant underground lab where these horrific human experiments are happening. But it's also worth noting that this happens in literally every other Resident Evil game, so this isn't exactly anything new. I do like the changes to the zombies, though. I think it's pretty interesting. But you do kind of see how this game just goes back to the same old tropes about you go to this really cool, like, facility, and then you run through and escape. And then you go to this big underground lab, and then you go down to like the sewers almost, which was like a containment facility, like a prison almost in this game, like the basement. But regardless, I still think it works. I still think it's a cool trope. Like, would it be weird to have a Resident Evil game without some big giant secret underground lab? Yeah, probably. And another thing that this game does that I do think kind of works against it a little bit, nostalgia baiting, if that's even the proper term to refer to this. In this game, you go back in time to downtown Raccoon City. Of course, now the remnants of Raccoon City because it's been destroyed by a nuclear warhead. And originally, it was believed that the United States government ordered the destruction of Raccoon City, and then you learn that there's some big conspiracy where it was actually Umbrella that ordered it in an attempt to sort of cover up their involvement. But when you go to the downtown Leon sections, of course, you go to like the old gas station. You can go to Kendo's gun shop at one point. This game doesn't have as much of an interesting gameplay loop when you get to the downtown Raccoon City section, at least in my opinion. And then you fight like former BSAA agents. In my opinion, this section of the game is kind of tedious. Like, of course, it's a big change in pace from the avoid the enemies and just try to stay out of the way of the gray sections. But the Leon sections just really were not as interesting to me personally. A lot of people love the Leon sections, which is great because they get more stuff out of this game. But for me, I thought it was really tedious and kind of annoying to get all the detonator parts. I did think it was interesting to see sort of the Last of Us-esque environments of like Raccoon City, or at least the remnants of it. But this section just really didn't interest me that much. Like, whenever I was playing as Leon, I thought, man, the gray sections were really, really interesting. But that's not to say that it's bad. It's just, it's not my particular style. Like, I definitely am more of a survival horror fan, so that's where my bias comes into play. But I did think this section where you shoot glass from underneath the enemies was pretty interesting. I thought that was fun, and you can completely screw yourself over there, too. And look at this DMC-esque motorcycle chase. Isn't that nice? This is like the average Leon section, of course, very action-based. And then you and Victor here have like this sort of like a chariot racing, what is it called, jousting-esque battle here with the motorcycles. And then, of course, you go to the Raccoon Police Station, or the Raccoon City Police Station, or at least the remnants of it. And this is really where the game tries to cash in on nostalgia, because it'll show you flashbacks of Leon with Marvin, and you'll see, like, flashbacks with the Kendo gun shop. And this is cool, don't get me wrong. But whenever they really showed off in the marketing, the police station, like, wow, Leon gets to go back to a fragment of 1998. And it just doesn't really do anything with it. Like, yeah, you go to the police station, you walk through the records room, and you go down to the STARS office, you go through like the hallway. You can only visit maybe like 5% of the police station. Like, it's like the STARS office, the library, and like that's it. Don't get me wrong, it's cool to come back here. And they did bring back the most interesting Easter egg in the entire series. They brought back the Rebecca Chambers photo that Wesker had stashed away. I thought that was cool because that's like my favorite Easter egg in gaming history because it's so strange. But I mean, apart from visiting like the East Hallway, the library, and the STARS office, that's about it. And then the Raccoon Police Station section is done. It lasted maybe 10 to 15 minutes on a casual playthrough. That's all they do with it. Like, that's it. And then you go back to the orphanage, of course, Sherry and Claire visited. And then there's a bit of a stealth section, very similar to Sherry's from 2 Remake. And then, of course, as Chloe, I think that's what the character's name was, you discover that there's a big ARC facility, and then, hey, we've got to murder you. You're not an acceptable clone. But then you go back to the Leon section, and you fight the Tyrant. You fight Mr. X, basically. It's not exactly T00. It's a bit of a different version of Tyrant. And this is pretty cool. There's no fedora, unfortunately. His top hat's completely missing. But you do get to fight the Tyrant again, and he has a rocket launcher this time. So I think that's pretty cool that you get to fight another Tyrant. But it really, really does seem like they're trying as hard as they can to cash in on nostalgia. But eventually, at a certain point, Leon and Grace both make it. I almost said Clara, by the way, almost. Leon and Grace finally get to like a big underground arc lab. And I liked that section of the game a lot. For Leon's, it's very action-oriented. Hey, you snipe these enemies. These guys are going to really, really try to fight you. And then at one point, you fight Hunk, I think. They don't really say who it is, but clearly it's Hunk, right? Like, Leon is fighting this one guy who's like, oh, we finally meet. And he's like very skilled on hand-to-hand combat. And I'm like, that's Hunk. You know, was it a human unit never killed? So that's cool. Hunk's in this game. Oh, there goes Hunk. But I liked the Arc Lab section a lot. I also thought for Grace, her little stealth section was cool because there's lickers. I think that's awesome. And then they bring back like these Regenerator-esque enemies from 4. I believe that they were in Resident Evil 3 towards the end. But regardless, I thought the section with Grace was cool. In this game, you also might notice that there's first person and third person. The game recommends that you play Grace in first, Leon in third. I spent most of the game playing in third person, and there's a couple of reasons why. Like, number one, I just prefer third person. It's more traditional for Resident Evil, I would say. But also, you get these really cool animations of Grace stumbling and sort of her tripping over herself that you don't get in first person, and I much prefer to see the animations in third person. Like, why put these nice animations in the game if you're not really going to see it, you know? So I preferred to play in third person. That's what I spent most of the game doing. But the option exists. You can play in first if you would like. Now, I did platinum this game. I did 4 playthroughs. I played the first time on standard. Modern, of course, you can play classic if you'd prefer to use the ink ribbon system. Very traditional of classic Resident Evil to have ink ribbons. But I played in modern, classic, standard, without the ink ribbons. My second playthrough, I played on casual. And I should mention, there's a challenge you get if you farm microsamples with the blood collector. I did that in my standard playthrough. I just kind of abused a save. I would put a transfusion bag, reload a save, and just did that over and over until I got the challenge. But in my second casual playthrough, I actually ran through the entire game. I did the under 4 hours, no healing, and no blood collector challenges. And that got me enough points to buy infinite ammo for everybody. Or, you know, the rocket launcher for Leon with the infinite ammo, and then infinite ammo for Grace. And I bought Freya's needle as well. It's like a little automated pistol, kind of like a submachine gun. And my third playthrough was on Insanity with infinite ammo. It really wasn't too bad. There's a couple of tough sections, but for the most part, it really wasn't too bad. Of course, Leon and Grace defeat Victor Gideon. They defeat the big boss, and then they escape Ark alive. And then Leon tells her, hey, Emily might still be alive. I didn't hit any vitals, which leads me to believe that there's a story expansion coming. If that's the case, I hope it's Grace. Maybe Grace and Leon get one. I just want to play as Grace again. But regardless, my fourth playthrough, I played on casual, and I mopped up all the miscellaneous challenges that I have not completed yet. I got all the files, all the raccoon statuettes, and I just did everything that I didn't finish. This game does have a handful of costumes. They might add a bit more later on. Grace has some really good stuff. She's got like Noir, which I thought was awesome. She's got Apocalypse, which kind of looks like an outfit you'd see in one of the Resident Evil movies. I thought that looked great too. She's got the Dimitrescu, which is all right. It's actually my least favorite. She's got a really cool jacket right there too. I love her FBI outfit. She's got good outfits. But for Leon, he has like his Resident Evil 4 with the jacket, the leather jacket, which I think is great. He's got his police outfit from Resident Evil 2. He's got like a suit and tie, which kind of looks like John Wick, and then he has like an Apocalypse, which just kind of gives him a suit that's like slightly different than his actual default one. But I think Grace has great outfits in this game, and Grace was definitely my favorite part of this game. I think Grace's sections are like a 9 out of 10. Really, really cool stuff. I love Grace. The care center is so cool. She's my favorite part of this game, absolutely, and she's got some fantastic voice acting in this game too. For Leon, his stuff wasn't as interesting. I maybe would consider it to be a 6 out of 10 in terms of how much I liked it. I mean, Leon had some cool sections, but for the most part, I really didn't care for it. But overall, I think Requiem is a great game. It's probably in my top 5 or 6 favorite Resident Evil games. My favorite is still 2 Remake. I still think that's the best game, and 2 Original, and then 2002. But overall, I did love Requiem. I loved Grace. I love her a lot. I didn't care much for Leon, though. Sorry. I think this game is a 7 out of 10 at least. Maybe an 8, but I'll say 7.